Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Just point of order before we get started. Like, on the Winged Wheel Podcast, do you guys hit guys who don't have pucks? Everyone else is making their stance known, so I just wanted to get you on the record.
We don't have an HR department, so you can hit whoever you want around here.
Our HR department is actually Evan, and that was his official policy. So the memo is now circulating. Hit who you want. The puck is irrelevant.
I mean, that's pretty similar to George Parros' player safety, right?
That's right. We just want to see the boys play. Put the whistles away. People didn't come here to see the ref show. We don't want to be like that umpire getting mad at the LSU player for pimping his game-winning, his walk-off home run. Like, no one wants to see that. This is good. Someone, I tweeted something about the fight, the Washington-Montreal fight, like Wilson and Anderson in the bench, and I was like, I'm such a sucker for this man. And people are like, wow, you really have become Evan. And I want to put out a correction. I haven't become Evan. We have all become Evan. This is just his influence. He's like Hydra.
Yeah, who was watching that scrap in the bench not having a good time?
First, I influenced you with golf, and now it's the violence.
Yeah, that's right.
There was one guy watching it not having a good time. It was the guy who sat in front of me at the Tigers game on Saturday, and I heard him telling everyone in his group how much he didn't like it because he was a Habs fan.
No. I mean, maybe we'd feel differently if it was the Red Wings in the playoffs, but I just feel like you have to, at that point, just enjoy it for the beauty that it is.
Totally.
Who cares? All right, Max Bultman here on the Winged Wheel Podcast for another Good in the Room episode. The Red Wings offseason is well underway, and the discourse is well underway. There's only so much of a beating the three of us could take before we had to bring Max in to recruit. So, folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
I'm Max.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking about some potential changes and reported changes that have come in the Red Wings front office, as well as, what goes into the goalies for the Red Wings, a little bit of a review of what went wrong for them this season, and the season before, the season before, the season before, and continuum. And then we're going to get Max's thoughts on the Red Wings offseason needs, what is going to come in free agency, what to expect, overall vibes on the team with his insights from in the locker room and more. We are going to cover as we already have a little bit, the updates in the very exciting NHL Stanley Cup playoffs so far, as well as a prospect profile before overtime. Very quickly, the Winged Wheel Podcast is primarily supported by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. You get access to our bonus episodes, which record right after these main ones. And on Max episodes, yes, he is in them too. You also get access to the Winged Wheel Podcast Discord. And additionally, you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game in season, going directly to our Patreon supporters. And we continue the Patreon-specific giveaways in the offseason. Stay tuned. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. All right, let's start out with a report from our very own Sean Shapiro, host of Expected by Whom, alongside Prashant Iyer. Sean Shapiro tweeted recently, I don't know about any other changes to Todd McLellan's staff, but I have been told that the Red Wings will have a new goalie coach and have parted ways with Alex Westlund. There were rumblings out there that Todd McLellan was taking some time to evaluate his staff. So there's a big primer on this episode, which is, we still haven't heard from Steve Yzerman and Todd McLellan. And as you're listening to this may be before news that drops, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, etc. So there could be things coming, and we'll just leave it at that. So, listen quickly. If you're already here, you're well on your way. But let's start with Alex Westlund. Now, with coaches, and especially non-head coaches or even non-associate or assistant coaches, it's really hard to get a clear vision of who does what behind the scenes. And I'm not going to come out here and say Alex Westlund was the problem with the goaltending or anything, but in terms of changes that you may expect to see, this is one where you look at the Red Wings goalie issues, and some people may say, yeah, that tracks. Others may say, well, he didn't have a lot to work with. But the Red Wings goaltending has been a problem pretty much since Jimmy Howard came off of his peak. There's a little blip in there where Bernier was doing way more than a stand-in goalie should ever be expected to do, but that's essentially where the Red Wings have been at. So overall thoughts on this? We'll start with Brad.
I think it's an unfair but necessary move. And that's not necessarily a criticism of Westlund. I think it's the age-old debate with the Red Wings. Are they bad because of mismanagement? Are they bad because of coaching? Do they underperform because they're just not that talented? And again, it's the same thing with the goalies. The goaltending over the last few years has not inspired confidence. Do I think that's a goaltending coach issue more than I think it's a talent issue? No, I'm pretty confident they have got the level of goaltending that they can expect from the goalies they have. Now, could they have gotten more than they have gotten? I also think that is possible, which is why at the stage the Red Wings are in, they need to try things. They need to, not that this would be considered a swing, but they need to shake things up to see if they get a different result. So I think it's a good move, but I don't think it's a fair one.
Yeah, and part of this also, like, just to call it out, is going to be that this is Todd McLellan coming in and taking the time to install his staff, right? Like, there's always going to be changes whenever you change a regime, and even if it's not the GM and it's a head coach, like, his staff is going to be something that he wants to feel comfortable working with. And there's only so much disruption you want to make mid-season. When Todd McLellan came in, even though the Red Wings were in dire straits, they very quickly started winning, and they were in that playoff race up until close to the end, technically speaking. So you don't want to add too much chaos to the system, and you want to take time to evaluate, and you want to take time to understand what's working. And sometimes it's as simple as some guys have their guys, and that's it, right? Like, you know, if Evan ever becomes a head coach somewhere, I do believe he will, after some time, hire me and hire Max and hire Brad's kids and hire pretty much everyone but Brad. And that won't be... Oh, sorry, Max, I thought you were going to say something. And that won't be the fault of the people who Evan lets go. It's just because he has his people who he likes and cares about and will take care of. And those are the people who get hired. Anyone left off that list, well, they were irrelevant to Evan. But yeah, it's just kind of the way these things go. And when you look at Red Wings goaltending, I mean, we talked about how bad the PK was this past season. In our season in review, we said, like, if they had an average PK, you're probably looking at potentially a playoff spot even. And we criticize the players a lot. But also, if you look at the statistics, one thing that we neglected to probably spend enough time on was the goaltending save percentage on the penalty kill was, like, tragically bad. And even if you want to dig into, you know, goal saved above expected, like, bottom of the league bad, like, the Red Wings goaltending did not perform on the penalty kill either. So there's points over the past few seasons where the Red Wings goaltending has been good, but the trend seems to be, as the season goes on, it's faltered. So yeah, without knowing exactly what goes on behind the scenes, at the very least, you can't point to the Red Wings goaltending situation and say that has been going flawlessly, and you would expect no change there.
I think your point too about the coaching staff, like, when you come in mid-season, you're kind of merging two different staffs. And so, like, now that the season is done, they do have a chance to kind of reset everything. I think this is the number one thing I put on my off-season checklist was settle the coaching staff, right? And the two guys that I'm the most curious about were Westlund and Jay Verity. Verity has a big analytic background. I think he had some ties to Lalonde already coming in. That's just, you just don't know which way those things are going to go. McLellan had said some good things late in the year about, you know, liking the way that the two staffs had merged. He had really high praise for some of those holdovers. But when the season ends, you get to reset everything. And so those are the two that I've been kind of watching the closest. And obviously Sean reporting on one of them.
Yeah, and it's not like Westlund's come in and, you know, revolutionized the goaltending or really drawn blood from a stone. It's, you know, maybe it's time to experiment with a new voice, see if you can spark something with someone new coming in. They could be the same level of talent as a goaltending coach as Alex Westlund. We don't know, but, you know, maybe it's just time for a new voice in the locker room.
Max, you alluded to your off-season checklist for the Red Wings and what you think needs to come up for them. And let's jump into that. You know, there's been a lot of discussion on this show already about, you know, what do they need to do in the offseason? Where are the holes in this roster? What's next? I think let's start specifically with that. What are the holes that you're paying the most attention to? Less so draft, because those players don't turn around immediately, but in free agency, trade, what have you. What is, in your mind, a must address this offseason if the Red Wings are going to move forward?
Roster-wise, it's, the obvious. I think they need a top-line left wing. Ideally, that's a player who can forecheck, who can be that harder element, much in the same way Marco Kasper was, next to Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond. Ideally, now you start looking through the top free agents and you're going, these guys aren't really that profile. You're not signing, Nick Ehlers to come be your lead the forecheck, right? You're not signing him to be F1 for you necessarily. But I think you start to look a little off the beaten path, I guess would be the best way to put it. Like there's things that I think would be very interesting. Like Will Cooley is a guy in New York who I expect the Rangers to be very interested in keeping, but they're going to have some things to resolve if they're going to be able to do it. You'd have to make it really uncomfortable for yourself, I think, in order to give yourself a shot. But if you put a first-round pick on the table, if you offer sheet in the territory of a first-round pick and you make the Rangers decide, hey, are you prepared to pay him this much and turn down a first-round pick to do so? I don't know. That's the kind of move that I think could be very interesting, and it's the kind of move that I think the Red Wings finally are in a position that they have to really consider. Coming this close a couple years in a row, I think there is urgency there. I think the picks, while still obviously valuable, you could justify it if you think the impact you're going to get from a young player who's already 22, 23. And Cooley is just one example I'm giving, whether it's Peterka. There's other names out there that I think you could make similar cases for, and probably some guys as the offseason goes on, I'll add to this list. But I think a top line left wing who can be physical, who can lead the forecheck, who can do some of that dirty work would be maybe my number one priority.
You talk about being right there. I have to ask, because the conversation's been there. What was your sense based on Dylan Larkin's comments? I mean, he was answering your question, and we talked about how he brought up the trade deadline and feeling close of his own accord. What did you make of that? Was there a significant shift in your mind? Were you surprised at all?
Well, shift in that you don't typically hear players come out and say that, but I did think it was honest, and I'm never going to knock a guy for going up there and being honest. I think we can all understand Dylan Larkin's frustration through that, right? Like he's going to be 29 in a couple of months, and he's played one playoff series in his career in 10 years in the NHL. Like I don't know how you wouldn't be frustrated in his shoes. So not surprised that he felt that way. Maybe a little surprised that he took the opportunity to say it, but I know it got a lot of traction. I can understand that too, like because it is somewhat rare, but I kind of understand where he's coming from, honestly.
Something I said a lot the past few episodes was, like, you absolutely can't take away Ottawa and Montreal's progress from them. Like, you can't discredit them just because they are not the best teams in the playoffs and down in their respective series, Ottawa more so. You have to give credit where credit's due. So this isn't like a petty, they're just lucky to get in ahead of the Red Wings. But I do maintain, I think the Red Wings are within a margin of error in terms of results over the course of a season where they could have been this year's Montreal or even Ottawa. Ottawa really just had Allmark. That was the big difference between the teams. You see how the playoff series are playing out. And so far, I mean, Montreal's playing after we start recording here. They might even up the series. Do you agree that the Red Wings could be within a margin of error? Do you think they're right there? Do you think an offseason of some addition by subtraction and some depth moves could push them into that territory? Do you think there's some significant moves away in your mind?
No, I mean, last year we would have said the Red Wings were ahead of Ottawa, right? And that it's oscillated year by year, I think, within that grouping. And Buffalo at one point looked like they were ahead of both, and now they're at the very bottom of the pecking order. So I think margin of error is a great way to put it. I think they're all within a margin of error where, you set the bar right at 90, 91, and a few of those teams are going to be 1 or 2 points above it, and a few are going to be 1 or 2 points below it, or 3 or 4, or whatever you want to say. Over the course of a season, the ups and downs of a season, the different factors, injuries, goaltending, you have a coaching change and get hot, whatever, it can all be the reason that you end up on the right side of that or the wrong side of that. Would it shock me if the Red Wings are better than Ottawa and Montreal next year? No, it would not shock me. But what the Red Wings have to be careful about, both of those teams are getting kind of their taste for blood, so to speak, right now. They're in the playoffs. They're experiencing what that feels like. That's, I think, kind of a dangerous thing when a team feels that. We're seeing it with the Tigers a little bit right now. And I know the Tigers, they went and they retained, got Jack Flaherty back after they had traded him away, but there's a lot of the same group that was here last year in Detroit. And those guys get a taste of playoff baseball and what that feels like. And now they're the best team in the American League. That can happen in other sports too. Washington, if you want to stick within hockey. Washington made some offseason additions for sure. They went and got Dubois, Matt Roy, all that. And Logan Thompson, obviously. But that's a team that a year ago, we were all saying, well, this team they won the mid-off. They weren't supposed to really be in, but they got in because the East was so bad. Well, now they were the number 1 seed in the East this year. So you give a team that taste, and you better work real hard to chase them down, because if they get to build some momentum off that, that's where it really gets rolling.
The Perron move, which, I mean, to be fair, at the time, there was some kind of conversation of, okay, for that contract, you're okay with letting Perron walk. In retrospect, you see not just the offense, but the mentality he brings to the locker room. That is one where you look back, or even to the tune of Shane Gostisbehere's impact that you lost, Perron, like those guys are the kind of guys that I think the Red Wings are probably going to be seeking to replenish in the locker room. There seemed to be a little bit of a lack of it this season, or at the very least, the impact was very much felt with no Perron this year.
Totally. We expected that. We talked about it. I mean, I know when they signed Tarasenko, there were some people that were pretty excited, but the one caveat I think all of us gave was, look, he's not going to be quite the same as Perron as a fiery locker room leader. We all knew that was a big role Perron played, and he's not going to be as good in those down low, puck retrievals and puck protecting that Perron is among the best in the NHL at. Lo and behold, Perron's making a huge impact down the stretch for the Senators in those exact ways. So go figure, right? I do think that's a huge hole that cost them this year.
In your article, you talked about what the Red Wings have to do, and you mentioned that they have to evaluate the prospects that are going to be ready. How important is that, do you think, to the Red Wings' potential success next year? Because my read is that you can't, in the modern NHL, you can't bank on massive swings in advance. Like if they come, that's great, and your GM should and will be aiming for it. But statistically speaking, they won't, and the growth has to come within. Is the Danielson or Cossa or Mazur or, even long shot ASP or MBN, are those guys going to be crucial to the Red Wings moving up?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar in the way that Kasper and Edvinsson, if you want to look at the reasons that the Red Wings managed to still be close to the playoffs this year, those are two big ones, right? That you got serious impacts from guys that was already in your organization who by the end of the year, and in Edvinsson's case, the entire year, but for Kasper's case, by the end of the year was one of their most important players. And that started at this time last year. He was one of their, if not their very best player. I think it was him, Mazur, and maybe a little bit of Berggren. But I thought in those games watching him, it was Kasper and it was Mazur really driving the bus for them. You're looking right now at the Griffins and going, is Danielson ready to do that? Is he going to do that in these playoffs? Is Axel Sandin Pellikka? How does he, managing the transition? Does he look ready to really impact the game at that level? There's some nice moments, early in this thing. There's also a couple low moments where you're like, okay, that's something he's going to have to work on. And, there's a 2-on-1 that I think he didn't defend amazing. Nothing crazy. That's not a shock for a guy who's in his first few games in the league, but this is what you're assessing if you're the Red Wings. You're looking at, okay, do I really think this guy is ready to come into training camp and make a run at it?
One thing we've been discussing a lot is looking at this Red Wings roster and the contract makeup and the potential for addition by subtraction. And I mean, there's some tough ones in there, right? There's probably 3 or 4 guys that a lot of the fan base would stand behind and go, yep, that's an automatic buyout or an automatic waiver or whatever. But I kind of feel like you can't do or expect all of that to come through. You don't want that much dead money. You don't want to give up on guys that soon. Some of the contracts are longer. If you're thinking Confer kind of thing, those are going to be big hits. Do you think there's a lot of addition by subtraction coming? Do you imagine there's an opportunity for it? Or do you see maybe a bigger load of these guys staying on than Red Wings fans would potentially want to see right now?
I guess I don't know what the Red Wings fans would expect from it. I think there's some that to me look kind of obvious, right? The one I think is most interesting is Tarasenko. I did not think that went well. I would not hesitate to buy him out. The cap hit's 1.6. I think that would mean you have to be able to replace him for 3.1. I would have no doubt that I could replace him for 3.1. All due respect to the player he is and the career he has had. But what he gave them this year, I think you can find on maybe not an ELC, but certainly I think you can do it for $3 million, and maybe someone who has a little bit more of a defined identity too in the bottom 6. Whereas he kind of felt to me, I don't know what you thought, Brad, a little ham-fisted square peg round hole in that capacity a lot this year.
Yeah, we talked about this a few episodes ago where the bottom 6 needs to have a role. I think the term we were using was identity. And you look at Daniel Sprong last year, who brought none of the defense, none of the physicality, but damned if he didn't provide some depth scoring. Or you look at a guy we'll call it Mott this year. can't score worth a lick, but you know you're going to get some solid defense and some penalty killing out of him. And was it at a plus level? No, but like you knew what he was. And same conversation was had with Berggren. And yeah, Tarasenko, if he cannot produce in a top 6 role, serves no purpose, sounds harsh. But your point is correct. He is very easily replaceable, especially for those dollars where he was playing. And that player that's going to come in and replace him is almost certainly going to be more effective, whether that's defensively, offensively, hybrid of both. I don't know. But it's like, when we're talking about the bigger conversation here, to me, there's 2 no-brainer moves this offseason in terms of buyout and addition by subtraction. Tarasenko's one. Hall is the other. I think there could be debates on 3 to 5 other players, but you're not doing that many. You're just not. It's not realistic. You need bodies. You're not eating that much dead money. You don't have that many prospects coming up, and you're probably not going to do that well in free agency. So everybody's going to be coming up with this list of like 7 replaceable players. And you're correct. They're replaceable players. You're not replacing all of them in one offseason. So I think Hall and Tarasenko are the no-brainers. I think you can make a very strong case for Gustafsson in his role, and then you get into the maybe pile.
I think what will help Gustafsson is the Axel Sandin Pellikka kind of like uncertainty. Like when you're going into camp, if Axel Sandin Pellikka is not ready to make your team, Gustafsson can basically be the exact same role. Power play 2 type. And if you scratch him later in the year, he's not expensive enough for that to hurt you. You could even bury the contract if it comes to that later in the year. Not a problem. He can play either side of it. He, I think, has a decent argument to stay just on that, even though I think in some ways he's like a less impactful player. Justin Hall, I think, is the interesting one because McLellan had some nice things to say about him at the end of the year. If you watch that final post-game press conference, people were asking about, the progress and all that. And he goes, yeah, we could talk about the young guys, but Justin Hall's a guy who got a lot better throughout this year. Now, is that him just like saying something to prop his guy up after he, rode him pretty hard? There was a couple press conference moments on Hall that were pretty rough, and maybe he's trying to do a solid. I don't know. But if you take him at his word, that is interesting. To me, Brad, I would tend to think your way of, similar line of thinking. The buyout's 1.13. I think you can replace Hall's impact for $2 million, which is what you'd have to do to, that's what the savings are. Maybe that's how you get your chance to bring up one of these younger D, whether it's a Wallinder or somebody else, or you're going to go find like a third pair guy that you feel a little better about, or you're going to spend all that, just tack it on to what you want to spend if you want to go get a top 4 guy, which is what I think they should do. I think they should plan to try to get a top 4 guy and bump Sherratt down the lineup. That's how I would want to approach this. But that did give me pause to hear McLellan say that about Hall.
And what you just said there, Max, is kind of where I'm landing too, because I agree. I think on ELCs, you can't guarantee replacing all of what you would potentially be shipping out. In Tarasenko's case, I actually think Carter Mazur could very easily do like 10, 11 goals.
Or Danielson, right?
Right.
Like if you had to break Danielson in on third line wing next to Kopp and Soderblom, that's not a bad way to break him in, is it? Like,
no. And he could have a bad season, and it would still be a net benefit in terms of your dollars per production there. And you'd give him this isn't how fans think about it, but it would also give him some cover to say, okay, well, at least it's not how Tarasenko was last year, right? But on defense, especially, I think about that. Like, I would rather take a hit in terms of, even if it's a downgrade, lower down in the lineup, but just overspend on someone who can help the slotting, and it'll be a net benefit. Because I think the Johansson story is great, and what a win that he was good, even for most of the time on the second pair. But you can't bank on that happening again. And 2, we've talked about it. Like, you would love for Johansson to be an option on the second pair, but not a necessity on the second pair. So yeah, fully agree on that front.
Well, that's to Max's point about if they go big game hunting in free agency and get a top 4 defenseman, that could shape everything. I shouldn't say could. That will shape everything that happens below them, because if they get we'll swing for the fences, Gavrikov, you can trot out Gavrikov and Seider. Edvinsson and Johansson's passable. Now all of a sudden you have Sherratt, and you know who they could probably bring back dirt cheap? Petry, who would be an upgrade on what Hall is. And I know everybody flinched listening to that, but he's going to get a league minimum contract at most. So you look at the dollars in, dollars out, and then you can either keep Gustafsson or bring up Wallinder as your 7th defenseman for when the power play is struggling. If you don't want to trot Edvinsson out on the second power play unit to save his minutes, that is the ideal scenario. You upgrade up top, get a league min guy to fill in across from Sherratt and bring up a young guy to play as a seventh defenseman and plug in as needed.
I mean, how perfect would it be if Pellikka is that guy? You can play Pellikka and Sherratt on the third pair, you shelter those minutes, power play too. Like, that's a great way to break a young guy into the league.
It's too good to be true. That's why I refuse.
It is. I agree. But that'd be the ideal, I think.
And at some point, like if you're not going to use these guys as trade pieces, you do kind of have to see what you have in, and it's been mentioned by everyone else here too, like the Buyums, the Wollinders, even though they're not kicking down the door, like you see some NHL readiness or the makings of a guy there. You got to figure it out. I am still a big proponent of, I mean, maybe in the past was the better time to do it, but you use them in a sweetener for a different deal, whether it's a draft day deal. I know we were talking pre-show about that, Max, or another trade with a team like Vancouver, for example, who wants guys who are ready sooner. But if you're not going to do that, then see what you got, because they're not like flubs. They're not busts. You can't say that they're not going to be someone, but make the room for them. I get it that the Red Wings are now perpetually in this whole, okay, we have to make a move, we want to make it kind of thing, but it's not like the guys who are here and pros and not on ELCs are pushing them there on their own.
Yeah, I would want, certainly with like a Wallinder, right? Like, I think he has one more year where he's waiver exempt. I would want to know before the end of next season, like pretty confidently, hey, where does he fit into the plans? And there's exceptions to that. Like Johansson did not make the team until he was no longer waiver exempt. He made it in part because he was not waiver exempt. And, it took like half the year for him to become a real regular. So I'm not saying it can't work. I just think it's in your interest to not have to ever have a waivers decision on a guy who you've barely seen play, because that's how you can potentially lose a guy, or you can get caught like holding this roster spot that's kind of, who knows. I would certainly with Wallinder, I think, want to know by, I don't know, late next season, like, what do you think you have here? And it's evolving, right? Like, I mean, last time I was in Grand Rapids, I think Dan Watson was saying he was thinking Wallinder could be in the NHL fairly soon. So that's a good sign. I'm not saying you have to plan for him to be one of your 6 every night next season, but you want to have a situation where he could come up and play some games for you. And injuries will happen. It'll happen organically that way. I understand. But that's all part of the calculus, I think.
Last point here, going back to the penalty kill. I think Red Wings fans are thinking two things. One is, why the hell was it so bad? And 2, it can't possibly be that bad again. Now, I tend to agree with the second part, but work has to go into that. If the Red Wings fix it, and let's just say they're even below average rather than historically bad, like worse since the 70s, do you think that's enough to kind of get them into this conversation with the Montreal and the Ottawa, even if it isn't a huge, flashy offseason?
Yeah, I do, honestly. I mean, they're 5 points back of, is that right? 5 points back of where Montreal was? So first of all, you can just flip that game that you lost to them, and that's 4 of the 5. That's probably not what Red Wings fans want to be thinking about right now, but it is reality. Like, if you win that game and Montreal loses 2 points, you gain 2 points, that's a big swing. And I think you can absolutely find 3, 4, maybe 5 games this year that you can directly say they lost that game on the penalty kill or on special teams or whatever. Doesn't mean that, there's not other things that are going to change in the roster and it'll go the other way. You could probably do that on any number of things. But you can go find games where they were like 1 for 4 on the PK and they lost by 1 goal or 2 goals. And that's the game. It literally is the game. So you can't take away all the goals from the exact right games. I get it, but I think it's not erasable. I think the penalty kill cost them 5 points this year. I really don't.
We're going to be talking plenty about free agency. I mean, the draft as well, which is going to come first, and potential offseason moves as Max continues to join the show over the course of the offseason. So we will circle back on that later. For now, let's take a quick break here to hear from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. And when we're back, we're going to jump into some playoff updates. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's Evan's witching hour right now. Brad was talking at break about how excited he is to talk about this. I don't think we can talk about the playoffs without talking about the literal bench brawl, like on and off the ice. Tom Wilson, Anderson on the bench, fighting on the Capitals bench. Wilson's crying face, like doing the wah wah at the Habs players as the Bell Center was chanting "Ole, ole, ole." That's hockey. That's what we all know and love. I think there should be at least one of those in every series from now until the end of time.
this is what makes playoff hockey great. I understand the actual gameplay of it all. There's improvements there. It's entertaining. It's great. There's real hatred here. There's loss of logic and common sense at moments in the playoffs. It gets so heated and the intensity gets ramped up so much. Montreal's atmosphere is the perfect setting for this to go down because, again, those fans are insane on a calm day. You get them first home game in however many years. It's getting out of hand. Anderson and Wilson are fighting in the bench with that. I have to mention that poor linesman. He was not ready for that. And
did you see the Caps assistant coach defending himself with a broken stick?
Oh, yeah, I did see that. It was phenomenal.
That was his final stand.
This is the type of chaos you just don't get in the regular season more than every couple of years. And Wilson's reaction's perfect too. Montreal players are giving it to him. The crowd's going nuts. He's got this over-exaggerated, like, wham, wham, baby face, cry about it. We fought in the bench, get over it. It's perfect playoff hockey.
Tom Wilson is an essential NHL character. Like, the league is going to be worse off when he retires someday.
Yeah, he's going through his like redemption arc right now that I think Brad Marchand saw for a little while right there. Like, Wilson was at the lowest stock probably around the Panarin incident. And then just really people see the value in what Tom Wilson brings in entertainment. As long as he's not playing your favorite team, I think a lot of people are coming to appreciate what you just mentioned, Max. Talk about that series. First off, they're playing right now. It's 0-0 in the first intermission in game 4. So Washington's up 2-1, and that game was huge for Montreal. I think they came out, and obviously it was a necessary win. It stopped Washington from doing what Toronto did to Ottawa, which is go up 3-0 against a wildcard team, an Atlantic wildcard team, and one that both teams are being focused on by Red Wings fans, fair or not. And I don't know, like, I personally, like, I was wrong about this series already. I thought Montreal was a bad enough team based on how they played against Detroit. I picked them as my sweep. I always try to pick a sweep every year, like dart at a dartboard, and I picked that one. But really, as early as game 1, you saw that this wasn't going to be a pushover series. The goaltending injuries have changed everything now with Montembeault and Logan Thompson, so let's see how health affects those two moving forward. But this is an interesting one.
Yeah, and the goaltending thing throws a huge wrench into everything because I believe I saw Dobish was starting today, which he had a run hot in the regular season, so that could go one of two ways for Montreal. Either inexperienced rookie gets shelled by greatest goal scorer of all time, or Cam Ward 2.0 just decides, hey, nobody's beating me now. And we've seen both pass in the playoffs a bunch of times, so it's a huge wrinkle. But yeah, I hate it, but it's invaluable for Montreal to be going through this experience. And they seem to be handling it about as good as can be expected for a team in their position.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people leading into this series talking about the way that Washington kind of limped into the playoffs, right? And it felt like the Ovechkin goals chase kind of dominated everything there and maybe took them out of their groove and all that. And what I kept saying to people when I would get asked about it is like, yeah, but Montreal wasn't that good down the stretch either. They almost blew this. Like, it took until their last game to clinch, and there was a possibility that they were going to blow it. So I was saying, like, yeah, they're neither of them's playing great hockey. Washington's a better team. I've been really impressed by Montreal, and not the first time I've watched them or anything like that. It's not like I didn't see the potential for them to put a scare into somebody. I mean, Nick Suzuki continues to be one of the best stories since the Four Nations break. He's been outstanding. I'm just impressed that Montreal has been able to kind of find the moment as quickly as they have. And I think you saw Ottawa in that Toronto series, I think, really struggle at first with the moment, right? And they kind of knew what they wanted to do. And I'm sure we'll talk about that series in a little bit. But in a way, like, I felt like they got almost hijacked in a way that I don't think I've seen Montreal be hijacked per se.
Yeah, fully agree. It feels like they never let things slip away from them. And I know Ottawa fans will be listening to this saying that, you know, that the couple overtime goals difference or whatever it might be in this series looks way different. But yeah, I agree. Montreal has stopped it from getting out of hand, which, I mean, second wild card seed against a team that performed as well as they did all season. Not that they would have had every excuse to, but they kind of would have had every excuse to. Nobody really would have been too shocked. So I agree. Jumping over to the Ottawa series, Ottawa-Toronto. I mean, Ottawa in overtime last night, Jake Sanderson, who I do think is one of the more underappreciated defensemen in the league, and he has proven a lot of people wrong. He has been absolutely stellar. This guy is going to be a force, but he keeps them alive. But that series is still 3-1, and Toronto going up 3 games. Kind of devastating for Sens players and fans, because I think Ullmark has completely kind of turned it around in a bad way in terms of what he was in the regular season compared to how he started those first 3 games. And Ottawa wasn't that bad to the tune of going down 3-0. This series could have looked way different if my grandmother had wheels, kind of thing. I understand.
That's the thing, right? How long is it? What was the stat? Ullmark hasn't won a playoff series yet. So him turning back into a pumpkin at midnight is the worst possible thing that could happen to Ottawa. But again, the experience is invaluable. And I think it plays in Ottawa's favors that it's the Leafs. I don't expect Ottawa to win this series, but even with the circumstances, like there's no way they weren't getting up for Toronto. And yeah, they went down, but what was it, 2 of the first 3 games went to overtime? Hockey's a weird sport, man. One bounce this way, one bounce the other way, and it changes the dynamic of everything. So, is it funny watching Ottawa get blasted in the first round? Yes, obviously, but it would have been funny in the inverse. It would have been even funnier if the inverse was happening to Toronto. But yeah, unfortunately, it's good experience for them, and I don't think they've handled it poorly outside of that first game where they got a little overzealous and got into penalty trouble. But you prefer that to the alternative.
Way overzealous. The one thing I'll say, though, the question with Toronto has never been, can they win games 1 through 4? The question is, when it's time to put the nail in the coffin, can they do that? It's 3-1. The game is in Toronto. Take care of business, end the series. If you do not, it is a 3-2 series going back to Ottawa, and all the demons wake up, right? So this is where the series gets real. It's 3-1. It should end. It should end the very next game. Will the Leafs end it?
And you want to stay healthy too. Like, your guys are playing. Like, Marner is vibing right now. Like, and there's more in the tank for Matthews, for example. Cut the attrition early. With the current model of how the playoffs work, what's coming next if you win. It's not going to be an easy series. Keep yourself healthy. Stop the narratives early and move on with it. So I know Red Wings fans are cheering for either Meteor or Dark Knight Rises, Bane style elimination of both teams here. But I mean, depending on what kind of sick, twisted joy you get, you're either going to see another Toronto collapse or you're going to see a team that's in the Red Wings tier, so to speak, fail here. But yeah, I'm curious to see how Toronto handles this and if they can shake any demons at all, which would be a shock.
Sneaky Mitch Marner implications too, right? Like, for everyone who wants him to hit market, you're rooting for Ottawa to come back and get that market real loud again and remind Mitch Marner what it's like when you don't win there. I guess it's kind of all he's known, but you know what I mean? Like, that's when the boiling point is the highest, is at this time of year, you lose a playoff series. That, if you want Marner on the market, it's what you want.
Listen, we're rooting for the Sens to come back for the Marner implications. We're also rooting for it because it would be the funniest thing that's happened in hockey history if, after all the Leafs demons, they blow a 3-0 lead in the Battle of Ontario. Come on, that'd be peak entertainment.
Elsewhere in the Atlantic, Florida, Tampa Bay, I think, started off at a shocking pace in terms of Florida taking over. Tampa Bay wins Game 3 pretty handily, to the point where you're like, okay, they're not out of this. But first off, the hit by Hagel on Barkov, the interference major, which was then suspended a game. The next game, Tkachuk gets his own, major for a late hit on Gensel, doesn't get suspended. You're not surprised to see this in the Battle of Florida, but that, I hope, if any series has to go to 7, it has to be between those two. First off, to give anyone else who the winner plays a chance, and secondly, because it's just too good and it's delivering in terms of entertainment so far.
I'm glad you put that qualifier in terms of entertainment, because the extracurriculars have been exactly as you would expect between Florida and Tampa, which is always fun. The series, the hockey's actually kind of sucked. Like, we have not had a great game in that series yet. So thank God for the extracurriculars, because honestly, I thought, based on quality of hockey, this was the series I was most excited for, and it just hasn't delivered on that front.
Was the Hagel hit a suspension for you guys?
I'm okay with it. It's going to be a point that I'm going to make, that hockey
with the hit or the suspension.
I'm okay with the suspension. I'm going to bring up a point that hockey people hate, but it's valid. You got to protect your stars. And if Barkov ended up with a long-term injury out of that, the sport is worse off for it. I don't like head hits. Everybody knows that. That's an opinion of mine that I've held for a long time. I don't think head hits should be allowed in the NHL at all. So the fact that it was not well timed and it was pretty obvious what he was trying to do, I'm okay with the game there. But I'm also, there's, again, the meathead hockey guy is me, is I'm happy Tampa won the game he didn't play, because that felt like the karmic balance of it all, saying, okay, we got to suspend him. We don't want to, but we have to. And then they win the game anyway, so it didn't have an impact on the series.
I think they got it right, which I'm kind of surprised to say. I think they got it right with both Hagel and Tkachuk. And the difference is, and I believe this is actually written in the rule book, part of the discerning factor in terms of how you assess a major and evaluate the hit is the violence of the hit. And that was very much, the play was going heavy one way with Barkov, and then the cutback was heavy the other way. That's a violent hit, the kind of hit that causes whiplash, a head to hit off the ice. I love a big hit. I actually have no problem with Tkachuk going and doing what he did to Gensel, understanding it's a penalty, but I mean, he hit him square in the chest. And so if you're going to take a penalty, that's probably the cleanest way you can do it. But the Barkov one, I'm like, oh, that's the kind of one that can, if it goes really wrong, ruin a guy's career. But then if you're going to allow that, you're going to allow guys to take shots at stars and potentially take them out of series. So to me, that one did cross the line. I thought, the major and then the game suspension, I think that was the right call. I know people might be surprised to hear about the violence of it coming into, being a factor in terms of determining whether it's a suspension or a major. But to me, I think they got that one right in terms of how you want the game to play out and the series to play out.
As a connoisseur of violence, I agree with you, Ryan. Like, I think they got it right. Like, Hagel, I think, thought Barkov was going to make a play on the puck, which, you can think a guy's going to do whatever. You still can't blow him up like that. But it happens so fast. He makes an instant decision, and it's the wrong one. So one game for him makes a lot of sense. I think the Tkachuk's hit was the right call as well. Like, Gensel tries to make a play. He gets lit up, and I think everything sort of worked out. I can't believe the Department of Player Safety got this one right, but I think they did.
I had no issue. I mean, obviously it's a penalty, right? But I had no thought that the Tkachuk hit should have been a suspension. Like that, it was a late hit, but that's what it is, right? The only reason it would be one is if you were like, oh, he's doing this as retribution. It's premeditated to, whereas I do buy that Hagel it's a snap decision. He fully expects Barkov to get a stick on that and he's going to finish the hit. If that had been like, if Barkov gets a stick on that and then it's all of a sudden like a finished check, it's less late than the Tkachuk hit, frankly. But it's point of contact to the head is where I think you can buy that's where the suspension comes in. I wasn't totally sure that either should be a suspension, but if one was going to be, it had to be Hagel, in my opinion.
The post-game pressers after, or the press after, where Moritz first said, like, we only hit guys who have the puck. Cooper follows it up by saying we only hit guys who have the puck because obviously the Tkachuk hit happened the next game. Those two, first off, competing for head coach of the all-time dudes NHL team. And secondly, hysterical, the banter going back and forth because they can both lay it on thick when they need to. Incredible cinema between them.
That's why you want the Battle of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who rails against the whole bracket system in the NHL for playoffs, this is where I'm proven wrong because this is just too good. I also had a realization, Evan, I have to make a note to tell Mel, we need to make a Violence Czar shirt with an outline of your face on it, or like Connoisseur of Violence, something to that effect. It's just, that's easy money right there.
I am down for that. I'll allow it.
Okay, you'll sign over your name image.
That's the NIL deal I'm working towards, yeah.
Headed over to the West, Connor Hellebuyck. Is he collapsing again? Because it's not looking pretty. St. Louis ties the series. I didn't think St. Louis would be pushovers this series. People watched them. They came into the playoffs hot. If you think Washington came in sputtering, St. Louis did the opposite. But a lot of this has been on the backs of a Connor Hellebuyck near bottom of the league performance so far in terms of playoff goaltending. Are you concerned if you're a Jets fan? President's Trophy might go out the window here.
I mean, how can you not be? Last year, I think most people were willing to forgive him for the poor performance because it was Colorado. Oh, you got lit up by Rantanen, McKinnon, Makar. Understandable. Have a good summer. Listen, St. Louis is a good team, and they're better than I think people have given them credit for going into this playoffs, especially coming off the 12-game heater that they had shortly before it. But they are not the Colorado Avalanche. And Winnipeg's roster isn't stacked, but these results are not a reflection of that roster. And if Hellebuyck can't get it going, he's got 6-7 years left on that contract still. Mark Scheifele's living up to his end of the contract, big contract extension this series. I don't know, man. Winnipeg's a tough one to get a read on because a lot of people in the regular season said they only won the President's Trophy because of Hellebuyck. And there's a lot of truth to that. And now it's like, okay, well, they're getting exposed for it because he's been below average and the roster's not able to make up for it.
What's so weird to me, though, and you mentioned like the contract, you're not mad at the contract because he's the best goalie in the league in the regular. He's going to win the Vezina possibly unanimously. And I think it was lopsided like that last year, too. And I don't know, with skaters, when you see these great regular season players kind of wilt in the playoffs, there's a real easy kind of story that you can construct, right? Oh, again, it's the playoff physicality. The goals are scored in different ways. The rush offense dries up. You got to score dirty. I don't get what it is for a goalie. Is it just that there's increased traffic? It's such an easier story to tell when it's a skater versus a goalie. You know what I mean?
Something that I've noticed is I'm not terribly impressed by Winnipeg's defense in this series. And I mean from the guys who are supposed to be good. There have been a lot of moments where I've looked at Morrissey, for example, who's universally hailed pretty much. And I'm like, oh, that's a tough move. Pionk, who just signed a 6-year times $7 million contract. Some people might be saying, oh, well, that's one guy off the board. Look what Jets fans are saying about Pionk. And look how they feel about him after, this most recent game. I don't think the Jets defense is helping, and it makes me wonder how much cover was Hellebuyck providing when the game gets tighter, the forechecking gets harder and faster, and the space gets removed. Does this get harder for the defense who just are kind of caving in around it? Because not all of it is on Hellebuyck in my mind.
Yeah, I think the easy argument right now is to jump on Hellebuyck because he's not been good, but in the past 3 games, the Jets have not really scored. You're not going to win You might win playoff games scoring 2 goals, but losing 5-1 to the Blues is not going to lead to success in the NHL playoffs. Like, they need to be better as a team, and I think if they can get some more offense, I think that takes a lot of pressure off Hellebuyck to be a Vezina caliber goalie every single game. Like, they're the President's Trophy team. They got to get it together. They have to rise up to the occasion because right now, when St. Louis applies the pressure and gets up for the moment, Winnipeg's not answering the bell, and they're kind of looking like one of those regular season frauds right now.
Brad, you had a comment a couple episodes ago about the eternal debate of if hockey is a strong link sport or a weak link sport. And like you, I'm coming around to the idea that it may be a weak link sport. And St. Louis kind of typifies that because I cannot find their weak link. They don't have, frankly, are Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond, are they the 2 best forwards on the Blues? Like, could you at least make that argument? And yet here they are. And I picked them to win this series, first of all, because I found them so likable, so deep, so relentless. And it fascinates me. It reminds me of the Islanders teams that took the Lightning to those, down to the wire Eastern Conference Finals series, where you're just like, you shouldn't be able to do this, and yet you are. And it's kind of because you don't have this weakness, and there's no real obvious way to exploit you.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, especially with St. Louis being the hallmark. I think literally last episode, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, someone asked us, of all the playoff teams, what does, in terms of roster building, Detroit's path to success look like? And I said St. Louis. I said, I don't think they're a contender, but you're looking for a team who's lacking true superstars, but is good. It's the Blues, right? And obviously they still have work to do to be a Stanley Cup contender, but they're not terribly far off. A couple more shrewd moves and they could be in that range. Even when they did win their cup in 2019 or whatever it was. Yeah, they had Pietrangelo and O'Reilly had a thing, but they didn't have Connor McDavid or an Alex Barkov or any of those level players when they won. And yeah, they are just a likable team. That's actually a great way to put it. You try to nitpick them and it's hard. Now you look at the cap structure and their defense and the age, and you can see the warning signs flashing. But for the time being, you're exactly right. Like, they're beating Winnipeg in at least 2 of the 4 line matchup battles, and you could argue 3. Like, Winnipeg's top line's running hot. That's it. They've got nothing going for them below that.
I think one of the distinct differences between the St. Louis Blues and the Detroit Red Wings are the self-belief and the will that they can win games that they should have no business being a part of. I would not be able to see the Detroit Red Wings take on Winnipeg and be leading the series right now. I think their mentalities couldn't be any more different. But I agree with everything else, Brad. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
And that kind of comes with like having been there, right? Why would anyone in St. Louis think that they can't get hot and going around? They literally did it and won the Stanley Cup doing it, starting with the guy in net, who, by the way, has had as many doubters around the NHL, including, I'm sure, some people in this Zoom call. Certainly I was one and have been a Binnington downer. Damn if that guy doesn't rise to the occasion pretty much whenever it's asked of him in those big spotlight games.
I've never been wrong about Binnington, and we'll leave it at that. Like, nobody go check that record. It's a waste of your time. You mentioned McDavid there, Brad, and I think we have to jump over to that series now, because talk about storylines going every direction. I mean, LA making a coach's challenge that cost them maybe a game, and let's see if it's more. Surprise to everyone that Skinner's not the answer in net for Edmonton. Was it 11 plus goals on, it feels like 12 shots, and you have Calvin Pickard as your goalie now for a team that's trying to take McDavid and Draisaitl and company to the Stanley Cup, where they were minutes away from winning it last year, potentially. You have the defense just completely failing in Edmonton again. That series has been wild so far.
Every year, McDavid and Draisaitl don't win the Stanley Cup. Somebody in that front office needs to be fired for malpractice. Again, it's not that the problems in Edmonton are bad, and that's the frustrating part. It's the same thing that happened in Detroit. It's that the bad things were bad and predictable. Like, there were solutions that could have been found a long time ago, and they were not addressed. And here we are watching, what a weird statement to say, Calvin Pickard starting an NHL playoff game in the year of our Lord 2025. Because who could have seen this coming?
Is there a series, too, where you're like, your narrative impression of it has swung more period to period than this series, right? Like, you start that game 1 and the Kings are all over them, but then the Oilers make a late push and they tie it up, and you're like, okay, here come the Oilers. Even when the Kings win it, they squeak it out late, you're like, but the Oilers showed they got it. Next game, Kings down their throat, just crush them. And you're like, oh, this is the year that LA's going to get it done. And that continues a little bit into Game 3, where they're up 3-2 in the second period and 4-3 in midway through the third. And you're like, yeah, they're going to take a stranglehold here. And then the Oilers come roaring back, and now I can't shake that voice in my head that's like, yep, Connor and Lyon, here it comes. But we're recording this, it's 8 p.m. right now Eastern. The game's going to start in like an hour and a half. 2 hours from now, it could be, nope, they're doomed. Like, it's just period to period, these fluctuations.
Again, we mentioned in the past, like, the Ekholm injury is brutal for that team. And then you see, like, well, I don't know if it was one of the Byfield goals where he just walks in, and Skinner shouldn't have let that in. But what on earth was Nurse doing? What's Bouchard, like, these guys who are supposed to be leading their defense and be worth all this money, you're like, oh my God, like, this is Bush League level defending in your own zone. And it's like one cog and so much of it is exposed. It is like the grand magnification of the Red Wings. Like, it was a house of cards where Andrew Kopp going out should not have sunk this team as much as it did. Matthias Ekholm is a incredible player, incredible defenseman, but one player should not expose so many weaknesses on this team like Ekholm's did.
I appreciate what you said there, because that Byfield goal, I saw Bouchard getting raked over the coals for that one. And you could nitpick and say he could have played it better. He was not the culprit on that goal. A top corner, short side from a lefty on that angle should never go in a million years. Like, full stop. But Darnell Nurse, I'm not a defenseman. You would know this better than me, Ryan. He was above the hash marks doing nothing along the boards when he already had support there. I have watched that goal 100 times and cannot wrap my head around what he was doing when he didn't get the initial puck battle and just hung around.
Not only would I not have gotten a Gatorade after that game, my dad would have made me walk home from the arena. My dad never made me walk home from the arena. He was an incredible father, gave me the sport that I love. I appreciate him for it, but that was so bad. I actually think I would have had to have walked home from the arena if it was a home game. Like, it was awful. Nobody got a yellow Gatorade after that game.
I love that you specified if it was a home game in this deeply hypothetical scenario. Just I'm not going to throw my dad under the bus and say he would have made me walk home from.
That actually makes it worse because you have to walk home in Windsor.
We should diagram this. Just put a circle out. Like, where is Ryan having to walk home from given the play? Bell River, Chatham. Is he hitchhiking from London?
No, that's what I mean. If it's from the WFCU center where the Spits played and where I played, not full time growing up, like it would have been a healthy hike for sure, even with a hockey bag.
WFCU center, real good press meal.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah. I was there last week for Game 7 of Kitchener-Windsor. It was very impressive.
I got to tell you, I played, so in Windsor, there's Riverside, Windsor, the two big teams, unless you go to AAA. And I was a Riverside kid, and the Riverside had a barn, and it was a barn. Like, it was a hockey barn, and it felt like it. And then, there's Windsor Arena, which is closer to downtown. And then they built the WFCU Center. Amazing facility, awesome for the Spits, really love it. And they have all those other ice pads in there. And so Windsor played there, Riverside played there, and it just lacks life. It has no soul. The stands for the smaller ice pads are like 2 seats back. And so I hated when we transitioned from playing at Riverside Arena to the WFCU Center. It was great facility, so much nicer for sure, but just lacked the soul of an old school hockey barn.
Did you ever go to that bar right by there, Average Joe's?
Yep.
Yeah. I killed some time there. I didn't know how long I would need at the border. I got through in record time, so I was like, I got hours to kill here, but good little spot. Support some local businesses on the show today.
There you go. We'll have to get your take later on the food recs I gave you, in case you hit up any. We'll save that for overtime.
I didn't get to, but I will get there. I will get to one of those pizza places.
Okay.
Because I really want to try Windsor pizza.
So as we're talking right now, the Caps are up 1-0 on Montreal. As Max mentioned, the Kings and Oilers play in 90 minutes. So overall, Winnipeg and St. Louis, that series is 2-2. Dallas, Colorado is 2-2 because Gabe Landeskog has turned back the clock. Vegas, Minnesota 2-2. LA 2-1 over Edmonton as of right now. Toronto 3-1 over Ottawa. Tampa is down 2-1 to Florida. Washington up 2-1 over Montreal again, just as of right now. And Carolina up 3-1 against the Devils. That is our playoff update. For all my complaints about the first round of the bracket, I do love the first round. Oh, I have to do this before we move on to the prospect profile. If you have the rights to the NHL and broadcasting in the playoffs, I don't care how hard the logistics are. I get that TNT is based out of Atlanta and they have other sports going on. And I do feel bad for the commentators because this is not their call and they're obviously taking the heat. I think Shayna Goldman made a really good point of saying, like, they do a good job for what they can do. TNT and any other rights holder, you have to send your broadcast crew to the game. And it's not just 2 plane tickets. I understand that. It's trucks, it's equipment, it's setting things up, it's timing. Getting into, Western Canada especially is hard. You're like going to Winnipeg. It's not easy like going to New York, right? You have to do it. You are the national rights holder, one of the 2 of them. I think TNT does a great show. I think they do a great broadcast and they've done a lot of good things for national broadcasts. There's a spirit, there's a life, you can't capture the energy of an arena calling it remotely. And even something so technical as the sound mixing. Like, you can tell, you can't feel the crowd coming through your speakers because of the way they're not just calling these games remotely from their Atlanta studios. They're also mixing them and the balance is off. And you can tell when a guy's calling it from in a studio versus how he feels he has to yell and be energetic and over the noise of the crowd. You ever been in a crowd that's so loud it almost feels like noise is distorting around you? I guarantee you that's what the Bell Center is like. I guarantee you that's what it's like in Winnipeg, but you can't tell from the broadcast. I think it's a disgrace. I think it's a shame. And I think if you're a national rights holder, fans don't give a shit about the excuse of it's expensive and it's logistically hard. You're going to pay that much money, you do it. And if I'm the NHL, I am up in arms about this, and I do not abide by this. I understand they have rights deals going into the future, but you have to find a way to fix this. It's a joke.
And oh, by the way, that's part of why local broadcasting in the first round of the playoffs is good. Do not take that away, please.
Yep.
I'll always remember this one because when you're directly involved in any capacity, it sticks out in your mind. But you need good crowd noise on a broadcast, and you really lose that. And like you said, with the audio mixing and the distortion and the levels, everything sounds weird. Ryan and Evan, I know you remember this because we were at the game, the last Red Wings playoff win, so I know we're going back several decades, when Athanasiou scored to make that 1-0. Detroit was all over Tampa Bay, and just like you could feel the building ready to pop, the tension in there. And, you know, when that goal finally got scored late in the second, like the roof blew off the place, the noise, the vibration was incredible. I was curious how that picked up on the broadcast, so I went and found a feed of that, and it was Bob Cole calling it for Hockey Night in Canada because, you know, the Canadian team sent their truck down to the States. It was just like, Athanasiou scores 1-0 Detroit. And he shut up. And just it picked up the whole ambiance of the arena and the energy and the vibration. So like now I can go back and rewatch that goal and like feel like I'm right back in the building. And I have not got that vibe from a lot of the broadcasts in the playoffs so far.
Damn shame. Just wanted to give some attention to it. And yeah, to Max's point, like I understand, you know, national broadcasters and commentators, they have to get their ad revenue. I understand why they want the business. This is local broadcasts do it right. Same thing as a good local restaurant, like supporting local business. Like the regional broadcasters are going to capture the spirit and the energy of the fans better than anyone else.
It's one round. You can live with one round of it, right? I mean, these are the moments that I think people want to hear. In Detroit's case, Ken Daniels on. I think that would be, and we only bring this up because obviously there was one example of someone kind of saying this should go away. Yeah. I just strongly feel the opposite.
And it's the first round of the playoffs, right? Like this is peak hockey. It's the best of the best. The energy just takes a different level. Like there's no excuse for TNT not sending someone there or figuring out a way with one of the other broadcasters to make it work with people in the arena. It's just a shame, and it's just another chapter in the long book we're writing on how the NHL makes missteps at the worst, most critical times.
All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to have more on that. Why don't we now jump over to this episode's prospect profile, and this is one that we'll be familiar with over here. Cameron Reid, left shot defenseman out of Kitchener. You know, middle to mid-late in a lot of rankings and mocks, but potentially a guy who is in the Red Wings crosshairs, is in their sights in terms of a player who would be a pick for them if they don't win the lottery, which is, I mean, statistically and cosmically guaranteed. Is Cameron Reid in that range for you, or do you think it would be a little bit too much of a reach? What kind of player is he?
He's going to be in consideration just because of the lefty and the fact the Red Wings could use another one of those. And again, unfortunately, around where the Red Wings pick is where you kind of hit that divide from the top end to the mid end of the draft. I really like Cameron Reid, and that's not going to be a surprise. I've watched him more than any other prospect in this draft as a product of him playing for Kitchener. He has my favorite trait in a hockey player. He is extremely smart on the ice. He's got a high hockey IQ. He sees the ice well with and without the puck, because I can't neglect the defending side of that, or else Ryan will point it out. He defends well. He carries the puck well. He transitions well. He can run a power play at the OHL level. He's a good, fluid, smooth skater. I wouldn't call him a burner. His top end isn't anything special. Good shot, not special. Good puck handler, not special. He's kind of that jack of all trades, good at everything, elite at nothing. And the brain is what makes him good. But the lack of elite traits does make me wonder what his ultimate upside is at the NHL. I think if everything goes right for him, he's a good number 4, possibly number 3. Do I want the Red Wings to swing higher than that at 12? Yeah. I look at Cameron Reid as like a higher hockey IQ, slightly more offensively gifted Albert Johansson. Not one-to-one comparison, but if you're looking for a familiar comparison, that's probably the one that jumps to mind for me.
Like a true second pair D, right? Like whatever you think of the tools. Like I think the skating is quite good. I think it can challenge the sense. But I agree that I don't think he's going to turn that into some like big offensive profile. Like he's on your second pair, and I think at 12, can you justify it? Yeah, I think he's somewhere like kind of on the fringe of the mix. If for some reason you really didn't like Jackson Smith or you thought there was too much risk in his game or something, then I could see Reid being a pivot. But I think I would lean toward the upside that Smith brings. I think with the extra size, you can argue it's upside in both the offensive and defensive end in terms of how he grows into that. So that's where I'd kind of come down. But I think Reid's put himself in that mix of, the top 5 defensemen that I think you have to at least talk about him, especially, we see defensemen go. So Smith might not be there. Aitchison might not be there. At that point, if you want a lefty, I wouldn't have a problem if they took Cam Reid at 12. I just think it's a little safe, I think.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said. And, his offensive numbers jumped quite a bit this year, which means, he's taking stride and going in the right direction. He's finding the offensive touch, which will help solidify him being a top 3, top 4 D-man on an NHL team. I agree with you guys. He's really, really cool to watch. He's very sound. He's a decent skater. He's got a good defensive game. Like, there's no reason why he couldn't be a 3-4 guy at the NHL level, and he would solve a lot of problems for Detroit if they did end up picking him at 12.
I'm going to sound like a broken record because this is just a function of where the Red Wings are most likely drafting. If you get a second pair minute munching defenseman who's not going to be, your power play quarterback, and it's not going to be your top pair guy from pick 12, that's a great result. It's not just a good result. It's not just a decent result. It's a great one. And that's why I look at a guy like Reid and I'm like, that's attractive to me. But you still can't shake fundamentally in terms of the way you think about the draft, and especially in the position that the Red Wings are in, where they are lacking superstars. If they had superstars, but they were lacking the depth, I can see them taking a different approach here. But they're lacking the superstars and the high-end offensive talent or elite traits in their lineup. They need more of that. You do have to lean towards taking the swing and taking the risk. So like, Max, Brad, and Evan all said, if there's a guy there who has more of a dynamic element to him, has more upside, you do have to give that more serious consideration. And I don't say that lightly because I really like Reid's game. If he's a couple inches bigger, I don't know that you're necessarily having this conversation the same way, for example, because if it's a bolt-on, second pair, this guy's giving me a minute muncher, 22 plus minutes, he's getting drafted higher, but then it's a no-brainer. But yeah, if they end up with him, I am very much not angry at all. But I would be surprised if the board shook out in such a way where there wasn't at least one player who intrigued me enough to give me some pause there.
Yeah, I know we're going to do these hypotheticals a million times before the draft, but, let's say hypothetically there's the forward group that goes, you're not really liking anyone and remaining there. If it's him and Aitchison sitting there at 12 and the Red Wings are on the clock, which guy are you guys going for? Because I think I like both their games, but I think Aitchison brings a dynamic the Red Wings are sorely lacking, but I think I could be persuaded either way. So I was wondering what you guys thought.
I think the physicality is that other element that would put it over the edge, right? I mean, Brad talks about like the elite trait. You could say Aitchison's compete is like a separator there between him and Reid. And Reid's a better skater. Aitchison put up more offense too, which, goal scoring particularly.
The concern for me would be Aitchison as a late birthday, so he's a year older. He's in his 3rd season in the OHL, whereas this is Cam Reid's 2nd year through. Like he's a true 17-year-old. I think Aitchison is the bigger swing for the reason Max laid out. The physicality could be a separator. The compete could be a separator. I think what his ultimate ceiling is could be higher, but I think his floor is lower than Cam Reid because of the hockey IQ and the skating. So you could justify either, but where the Red Wings are sitting right now, this needs to be an upside pick. I don't care what position they take at 12. It's got to be an upside swing.
Here's another sneaky consideration on that. If you expect that your long-term, top 2 on the right side is Seider and Axel Sandin Pellikka, I think you feel a little bit better about Aitchison being able to play with either of those, and you can either have this mean, gritty shutdown pair with Seider, or he can be kind of the protector for Sandin Pellikka, whereas with Reid, I almost think you would have to play him with Seider, because I don't think he has quite the size to feel good about deploying that as an NHL pair, 6'0" and 5'10", you know what I mean?
Yeah, those dynamics, you have to agree. And you also think about the way that Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings think about their blue line. They want a big, rangy blue line. Sandin Pellikka was an exception, but because of the skill and the dynamic elements we saw to his game, they're not going to make a trend of that. And we've seen the fruits of that already with Seider and Edvinsson. And even in games where they've struggled or sometimes they get beat, their reach and their size and their physicality to whatever tune that it's out that game has helped them. So it's what he built in Tampa Bay. That's what he wants in Detroit. I would be shocked. I shouldn't say shocked. I would be a little bit surprised to see him deviate away from that for a Cam Reid type. And again, like you mentioned, Max, you already have those small, hopefully second, if not better, pair defenseman and ASP. Do you want to inject another one of those? Johansson's could be a fixture in this lineup, presumably. He's not big. You're not going to want too much of that to have to work around, because it kind of locks you into place in a bad way on your blue line. That's Cameron Reid. Kitchener Rangers. We don't have to talk about what they did to the Windsor Spitfires. So with that, we are going to take a quick break. And when we're back, the final segment here on the Winged Wheel podcast, back after this. Technology is supposed to make our lives easier. So why does it feel like we have less time than ever? Every day somehow ends up packed tighter than Detroit's and Toronto's tea times in May. When it comes to eating well, forget it. It's either takeout roulette or thawed sadness. That's why we've been loving Tempo. It's our new go-to for fast, healthy meals that actually taste good and don't take forever to make. Seriously, the apricot glazed chicken and rice is elite, and the barbecue pulled pork and farro bowl has absolutely no business being that satisfying for something that cooks in 3 minutes. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that sends chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu straight to your door. You get over 20 options every week with real ingredients, and all you have to do is microwave them. That's it. No prep, no mess, no excuses. So whether you're grinding through a long workday or recovering from another third period collapse or editing podcasts way late into the night, you can still eat like a functioning adult without sacrificing time or flavor. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. That's tempomeals.com/wingedwheel for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime, again, is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. The Discord, the giveaways, the bonus episodes, all of that and lots more. Can't say thank you enough to our patrons, members of the Dub Dub Club. Let's take some questions from them now. The Imperfect Patron says, besides big game hunting and free agency, who do you think could be realistic big name trade targets for the Wings to acquire in the offseason? Max, you are our guest of honor, thus you have to answer this first. Sorry.
No, yeah, I would look at probably some of the RFAs that we talked about, whether that's like a Cooley or a Keandre Miller or a Peterka. I don't know that Bowen Byram quite fits. I mean, as a player, like you'd certainly love to have his skill set, but do you really want to pay that much to a defenseman knowing you're going to have Edvinsson coming in too? And I think you could argue it, right? Because if you potentially would want to go big game hunting and try to pay like a Gavrikov, you're probably paying him similar to what you'd have to pay Bowen Byram. So maybe you shouldn't categorically eliminate that one. So Marco Rossi, did I say him? Like I think some of those RFAs are very interesting, especially on some of the teams like New York, where they could have some shakeup potential. I'm trying to think of non-RFA like trade potential. I mean, would it be crazy to say like after how bad it went in Nashville, do the Predators try to shake it up with any of the guys that they've brought in over the last couple of years? I think you could justify like, do you want to try I don't know, kind of a makeup call on bringing in like a Stamkos or a Marchessault kind of thing? Would that be insane?
For a lot less money, yeah, absolutely. Because I don't hate those guys, and I think there's still something to them, despite how bad it went in Nashville. But it was just the contracts and the terms. So you do have to be careful for the amount of term you'd be adding. I think I'd be curious to see how you make that work with the cap structure, and if you end up moving out a Coffer contract, for example. But I'd be interested in that.
Well, so Stamkos will have 3 years left. Marchessault will have 4. Obviously, different cap hits, right? Stamkos at 8, Marchessault at 5.5. I think if you offered me Marchessault 4 times 5.5 as a free agent this summer, I wouldn't balk at that. So if the Predators were willing to, or wanted to even get kind of a shake up and, okay, maybe this didn't work out so well, go back to the drawing board. I could see that argument.
All right, moving on here. Angelo says, I just realized today while mowing my lawn that I've been listening to you three goobers since your first episode when I saw your post about a podcast. I guess I'm the real goober here. Angelo, it's been a pleasure being a goober alongside you, man. Thank you for sticking along. You're an insane person. Angelo says, how do you think the draft would change or the trajectory of players would change if they raised the NHL draft to be 19 or 20 instead of around 18 years old? I've heard this mentioned in the past, and you'd have to have a transition year, but basically raising the age of the draft, the minimum age. How would that affect things?
It'd be pretty annoying for the few prospects every year who are able to, step right in, and obviously delays their possibilities a little bit. But after you got past that, it would normalize. The problem is that transition. Like, imagine back when if they had proposed something like this back when the Red Wings, 2019-20, and they're like, yeah, actually this year it's, this is the year we're going to choose to do this pivot. And if you're going to take an 18-year-old, it has to be under these parameters. And pretty soon you're not going to be able to take 18-year-olds. It's kind of hard. I mean, the reason that it's tricky is because of guys like Connor Bedard, Gavin McKenna, we expect. Connor McDavid, certainly the most glaring example of a guy who's just like, you can't keep a guy like this out of the NHL at this point. Look at what they're doing to their junior league, to whatever. It helps having the NCAA option available to everybody now. But I will say the thing it would be good for is getting it more on the timeline, similar to like the NFL, where you draft a guy and they're in your lineup right away. Like even 19 wouldn't be perfect for that, but it would be closer. You'd probably have 10 to 15 guys ready for the NHL right away every year instead of 1 to 3.
I think you have to wait to see how this whole NCAA, CHL shakeup goes. And I suspect when this dust settles, there's going to be more avenues for these guys to go out and play in the appropriate setting, which is probably an argument for this potentially being the case in the future. I could also see a stepped approach where it's like, if you draft a guy in the first round, then you can take him at X age group. But if he doesn't go in the first round, he has to wait till next season kind of thing. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, but I do kind of wonder if you can accomplish what Max just said. I think that'd be massive. It'd make draft picks more valuable. It would make rebuilds ostensibly turn around quicker, even though kind of not. Like, I could see a deal or to it.
But then what do you do about those kids who just are legitimately that ready? I mean, maybe it's you can only take a 18-year-old in the first round, but then the whole first round is still going to be 18-year-olds. You haven't really accomplished anything.
Maybe they have exceptional player status like they do with the CHL. But the guidelines, I think, for that would need to be super, super, super strict, and there would be no deviation from it, and it would have to be extremely black and white, because if you let an 18-year-old kid go in the draft, he gets picked early, comes into the NHL and gets blown up or washes out his career, that looks really bad for the NHL. So, maybe something like that's a possibility.
That, and like you're going to have teams arguing of like, well, the year we had it, you wouldn't give the top 18-year-old exceptional status, but now, whatever.
Yeah.
You could imagine which teams we're going to be talking about. Now that Chicago gets the first pick, you're granting the exceptional when they should, whatever. Like that does open the door. You're right. The ambiguity would be a killer.
Future Consideration says, thinking about Tarasenko, do you see a contender in search of depth scoring willing to take on his contract with the Wings retaining half but not giving up a pick or a prospect? It doesn't seem likely, but I've seen crazier things. You'd have to make a pretty strong argument that Tarasenko, like you'd point to his Florida time and say that would, be more of what you're getting, because the time in Detroit's not inspiring, but I'm not going to say it's impossible.
Is that even much more desirable than a buyout? I mean, it's less savings in year one. You lose the second year hit. I get that, but it's less savings in year one than just a buyout to eat half.
And the actual cap hit in the second year is peanuts.
All right, moving on here. Ryan Hanna's chin-strapped headband says, if you could take 2 non-first-round Red Wings skater prospects to their skill ceiling and put them on a current team, which 2 would you pick and why? So non-first round, it has to be a skater. And I imagine that's to stop us from taking Augustine. You would go... You'd
Plant
Chelnikov and Plant. Yeah.
I was going to say Brady Cleveland.
Say it again. So you get to take their ceiling, is what you're saying?
Yeah, take these skaters to their ceiling. They can't be a first-round draft choice, and they can't be a goalie, but they go to their skill ceiling as a prospect. Outside shot Lombardi too. actually.
Yeah, Lombardi has a case. Anton Johansson, kind of quietly a case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an everyday top 4 guy.
Big, mobile, mean right D is a pretty appealing. I think I would go him over Buchelnikov, to be honest.
But Buchelnikov's skill ceiling, like that's a 35-40 goal scorer.
Hands and sense, but I don't know. Like, do you believe that the feet are going to get around NHL defensemen? That's my question.
Like, if you look at profile of Buchelnikov and we're talking ceiling, not likelihood of hitting it, like he's DeBrincat, right? So
DeBrincat skates better.
does he? Like a little bit, yeah. But
to me, he does.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. But like, if we're talking ceilings, you got to assume that would come with a little bit of improvement on the skating.
Don't need to skate good when you're sitting in the OV office, just clapping bombs, going bar down.
All right.
He's in the mix. I think I might take Anton above him, but I don't know.
Absolute hell for Frondell. Fun little game here. Says lightning around. Would you rather? Assuming contracts are the same. So you're gonna get 2 sets or 2 different players, and just balance the contracts in your mind. Don't think about that. Just think about the players. Besser and Gavrikov or Ehlers and Provorov.
Besser and Gavrikov or Ehlers and Provorov.
Huh.
I'd take Besser and Gavrikov.
My gut reaction's the other one, but I don't know why. I didn't watch a lot of Provorov this year, but I'm not a big Besser guy.
Yeah, like I'm comfortably Ehlers ahead of Besser, but I'm also comfortably Gavrikov ahead of Provorov. I think for what the Red Wings have coming and what they need and stylistically.
You said lightning round, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Ehlers Provorov.
It's a tough scene when the podcast fence sitter is on you for the pitch clock. Sam Bennett or expensive Pettersson?
Sam Bennett.
Sam Bennett.
Yeah, I think that's unanimous.
Brad.
Contracts are the same?
No. Or are the contracts the same?
They say assuming contracts are the same. So I guess you're giving.
I wouldn't give Sam
okay.
Bennett 11 point whatever million.
Yeah.
But
Like, if I'm getting them both,
Pettersson that contract.
if I have them both for $8 million, I'll take that gamble roll on getting Pettersson back to 100
Pettersson's
points.
way younger too.
Yeah.
So sorry. I was thinking Pettersson with the
All right, move us along, Ryan.
One.
This didn't go well. Move us along.
Alexi Protas or Marty Necas? You go Necas here still.
I thought so. I don't know why.
Could you argue that Protas though is like more of a missing piece for them? Like he's got a little bit of that like kind of mini Mark Stone to him.
And isn't Protas like 5-6 years younger? I think I'm going Protas.
All right. Celebrini or McKenna?
Celebrini.
You have to go with the known quantity there.
Not even a question. I think Celebrini was amazing this year. I was floored by what he looked like as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Celebrini. McKenna's doing stuff that even Bedard didn't do in the WHL.
You can take him. I'm taking Celebrini. I'll bet you Celebrini wins more cups than McKenna. And I don't even know what team McKenna's going to yet.
It's Chicago. We already know this.
True.
It'd be a good problem to have for the Red Wings, this conversation.
Yeah. That's actually the theme of this whole thing. Buyout Hall or buyout Tarasenko?
Tarasenko.
I can't do more Tarasenko.
James Reimer or Shooter Tutor? Hey, I don't think James Reimer should be catching strays after what we saw from Red Wings goaltending after he left even. So I think he got his fair share. I also think some nights the Shooter Tutor would have been better than Red Wings starters. Why are we just besmirching the good name of a Shooter Tutor?
Shooter Tutor never gets pulled out of position, man. Shooter Tutor gets a bad rap.
We have a friend who has a young son, a toddler. He's getting into hockey, and guess what position he wants to play? It's very Evan Lobsinger coded. Wants to be a backup goalie.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And you'd think it's because he doesn't want to play every game. He just wants to be with his buds. No, the reason he wants to is because he wants to open the door. He really loves just helping and opening the door.
I love that. You need
Yeah.
a guy like that on your team. Just a real glue guy.
Just a glue guy at that age, like that's just elite level scouting right there. I thought of him because they got him a Shooter Tutor and he's just not at all interested in it. No, doesn't care to shoot on it at all. He actually sees it as like, that thing's taking my job. I wanted to be the goalie sometimes.
He's just going up to the shooter tutor and like squirting water at the mouth on the shooter tutor. Like, here, let me help you out, buddy.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap this one up and head into our Patreon exclusive overtime episode. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. Thank you to Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit, as always, for joining us. To all of you who support us on Patreon, we cannot thank you enough. Patreon.com/WingedWheel Podcast if you want to support the show. And if you want to help us out, but Patreon's not for you, that's totally cool. Wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Subscribe, hit the button, hit the thumbs up, the ratings, reviews, the stars, wherever you can do to share it with a friend. All of that is a huge help for us. And to all of our new listeners, welcome to the show. We know the offseason is starting earlier than we all want, but that doesn't mean we're going away. We're still at our usual twice a week schedule. There's a ton of content coming up. And to all of our name level supporters, thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Glenn Brabham, C. Lyon, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zawiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl Brutinen Nanowski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hale, Give Blood Fight Probert, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hatrick Sandin Pellikka, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi, Now I Have to Learn How to Click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, R.A., Richard Perkins, Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Sam Bankson, Slim Smitty Cards, Stephen Ortlieb, That's What I Appreciate About You, Tiger McDougal, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Wings Fan Chicago, Iserplan Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, A. Aaron, Ads Off the Jerseys, Ads Off the Helmets, Ads Off the Ice, Capitalism is Buns, Marks was right, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Baked Starfish, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, Captain Antonio Gracias of the United Federation of Cheesebags, C.E. Hayes, Chris Flinsky, Clay Adams, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton and Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Drop the Puck, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Evans, Brown, Pomeranian, not euphemism, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, J.M. Rhapsody, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Lamp Posts, Linda Hull, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raitmond, Matt Keeler, Mitch Minier, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Sadden, Soderblom Worshipper, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Shit in the Bed for Schaefer, Steven, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thoreau, Tubing is Unbelievable, Wingspan in St. Louis, Scott, your good friend and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you midweek.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.